Good evening, good evening, good evening. Oh my God. It's got to be a better way. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? Long time no see. My people, global citizen Carl Springer. Good to see you. Good evening, good evening. First of all, let me just make sure, do some housekeeping. Can you guys hear me? Those of you who are here. I normally have this horrible feedback in my microphone. Hopefully it's not there. Okie dokie. All right, I'm gonna get started in a couple of minutes. What I wanted to do is discuss this topic: how to travel to Africa in 2023. So it's been thank you very much, Carl. I appreciate that. Thank you, Jack Jackson. Good to see you, people. Okay, it's been a while. I know I was supposed to do this a while ago, but then I had to engage in some other business, some other work that I do. And so it took me away from everything I've been doing. So I've been posting a lot of shorts. Have you guys been checking out the shorts? Shorts seem to be doing well. We crossed 8K subscribers today. Is it subscribers or followers? What did they do on YouTube? Subscribers. We crossed 8K subscribers today. So I was very, very happy. We already look like we're on target for 9 or so before the end of or at least in the next couple of days. So it's looking good at the moment. But for those of you who've been following me for a while, I'm very adamant about travel. I think some of the problems that we face regarding this whole this like friction that's there between, if you want to call it, continental Africans and the diaspora, if there is, and there is, some people make more of it than it is, but the friction is there because we don't engage with each other in our native land. We tend to engage with each other on enemy territory in Babylon. In other words, most African Americans encounter Africans in America. It's already a hostile nation. And so everybody has their backup. So the idea that we are going to come to some sort of, if you want to call it, racial harmony in the belly of the beast is just a waste of time. So travel is an important thing. It's very rare that you hear of anybody going to Africa, not just black people, but it's very rare that you hear of anybody going to Africa and then coming back the same. Obviously, there are some places that you go that, and we're going to talk about some of those today, but there's some places that you go that are not, that could very much happen. But in general, Africa is a spiritual place, okay? Spiritual, not just from the religious point of view, if you want to call it that, but spiritual just because it just feels, when the sun of Africa hits you, when the smells, when you look around and the vast majority of the people around you are the same complexion, maybe different complexions, but they are of the same, close to the same dosage of melanin as you. What it does is it reinvigorates your spirit. And so you never come back the same. Even Oyibo people, Oyibo is terminology for white people. Even when white people go and come back, they have this feeling about them. Oh, I know a guy I know a woman who moved to Dar es Salaam. She went there for a job and then she's lived there for the last 10 years. Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So Africa has this ability to give you a different spirit. So it's very difficult for us to be having all these arguments on social media, on YouTube, which, by the way, and I'm a hypocrite myself, we are using the enemy's platform, if you will. And so for us to be having these arguments, these debates, these silly, unnecessary debates, when we could literally go back home and realize that the arguments are fruitless in the grand scheme of things. Whether this one is saying I deserve reparations, or this one is saying that I'm not, I don't discriminate, or I discriminate against this tribe or that tribe, it is really, really pointless. And so in the end, we end up fighting each other instead of dealing with the business of nationhood, right? And so I just wanted to point that out to you guys first, because I think it's very important. Travel is the most significant thing you can do as an African person. And to my people in the Americas, it is probably the most important thing that you have to do. You see, because for the rest of us, unfortunately for us, or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, because we're dealing with reality now. Let's start, and I said this in the last live. Let's stop getting too sensitive. Let's deal with issues so that we can move forward and deal with the bigger issue. For those of us in the Americas, you are fighting a battle with a people who will never allow you to feel comfortable. So your priority for yourself and for your children is to touch your homeland. And for you to touch your homeland, it doesn't really matter where you go. Okay, no, it does, and I will go into detail about that. Ultimately, it matters. It doesn't really matter where you go, but it's very important that when you actually go, you're going there with the intention of recognizing that I am not, I am. This is where I belong. This is where I belong. And so the motto for me this year, I think, for the next few lives at least, is going to be let this be your year of return. All right. Jack Jackson, good to see you. Global Citizen, Carl Springer. Kwame, my brother. Kwame, I think we were texting. We need to finish our conversation. Tito District, good to see everyone. Peace, peace, peace. So let me get started. So, first of all, let me give you a big disclaimer. I am not claiming to be the authority on Africa. I myself, of the 54 nations that exist, if you want to call them 54, I have only been to about half. Okay, so I haven't been to the whole continent. I happen to have affiliation with various places. Again, for those of you who don't know, I was born in Kenya. My mom is Rwandese, grew up in Uganda. My father is Nigerian, but I went to school in Benin. I went to school in Togo. And of course, I've traveled around various other places like Egypt. I've been to about 5 times, been to Morocco a few times, been to Mali, Togo, Togo, Benin several times, Ghana, Senegal, Burkina Faso, various places, Congo, Brazzaville, Congo, Brazzaville, Burundi. I've been to various places. So I have experiences of these places. Plus, I know many people in those places. I went to an international school in West Africa. So I have friends from all over the continent. So I'm not claiming to be the authority. And in any case, I don't think it's fair. But I think from my point of view, I'm able to give you, based on my understanding of history and the way the world is and the politics of the world, and also based off my travels, I can happily say that these places I feel are more suited to those who have never been to Africa before. So let's get started. Tito, this half is a lot. I wish I could travel to a fraction of that. My brother, you will travel. You just have to make it happen. You just have to make it happen. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, I'll put these big screen first and then I'll go into detail. Now, what I think is very important to understand here is that you guys, those of you with a US passport, and I want to take this time to really emphasize this, you don't know how privileged you are. I know there's a statistic that says something like only 30 or 40% of Americans have a passport, but you have one of the most powerful passports in the world. Yes, there are some places where they want nothing to do with you because of your politics and the politics of the government that you live under. But for the most part, you're a very privileged person. I grew up in Africa, and before I got our passport, my Nigerian passport in particular, is one of the most difficult passports in the world to travel with. You see, we have a problem in Africa. Africans cannot even travel around Africa freely because of the politics, because of the drama with the different colonial leaders. But Europeans can come to our place a lot freer, and Europeans can travel all around the world. People from the EU, people from the United States, they could travel around the world freely. So for us Africans, it becomes a problem. That's why you see there's a migrant crisis. People going through the Sahara Desert. If they could take a flight to London or to Paris, they would. But they have to go through the Sahara and then cross a dinghy boat over the Mediterranean. So you guys have to really understand that your passport is very valuable. There are millions of people that will kill for that passport. So make use of it. Stop being, and I just give this little anecdote, maybe it might help. I traveled to Egypt in December. And when I arrived, I was waiting for my friend to come and pick me up. And there's this African American woman who was stood there, older lady, maybe not that old, maybe in her 50s. And she looked so lost and so confused. And she really immediately recognized me. See that thing I was talking about how we recognize each other, they identify. She sees me as another black people, a black person amongst all these Arabic-ish people. And she comes to me and I'm like, you know what? My sister, let me drive you to your hotel. Because I think the hotel had let her down. So I was like, let me drive you to your hotel. Ended up taking us like 2 hours. For those of you who know Cairo, it could take you 2 hours to get from one end to the other. So her hotel was very, very far. So we go and drive her to a hotel free of charge. Obviously, I don't charge. And I remember she sent me a message the day after saying, thank you so much. No one's ever done something like that for me. Now, to me, that just seems like a very weird statement to make because I'm African. This is the kind of thing that we do all the time. But the reason why I bring this story up is because this woman had come to a very important part of the continent. You see, Egypt is very important, and we're going to go into detail about it. But she'd come to a very important part of the continent and recognized that even though her ancestors may have been involved in building this place, her ancestors do not control that place anymore. But because she was a US citizen, she was able to come there, regardless of her race. She was able to visit that place. Whereas people from my own country in Nigeria cannot visit Egypt without getting a visa. Kwame Olatunji, my brother, you know this story, I'm sure. I was supposed to go to Egypt with Dr. Obadile Kambon. He was using a Ghanaian passport, and for 6 months, nearly, more than 6 months, we were trying to get a visa for him, which we didn't get because he has a West African passport and Egypt is in North Africa. Okay. So anyway, those two stories I juxtapose for the purpose of just explaining to all of you that your passport is valuable. So make use of it. Okay. Now, how easy is it to travel in 2023? You people can't see me, can you? Okay. How easy is it to travel? Global citizen. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate the comment. You are an expert in my eyes because you have been to more than I ever have. Visa-free countries. So, again, I am not talking about anybody but people that have US passports, EU passports. Okay. So, people who have African passports, we have a lot more. Believe it or not, it's much more difficult for us to travel to these places. So, let's deal with the visa free countries first. Let me just make it a little bit bigger. These are countries where you have somewhere between 30 and 90 days to live there without having to get a visa. So, the green ones. How do you do this so that it's easy for us to see everything? Okay, so the green ones are countries in Southern Africa. So Botswana, Eswatini, which is Swaziland, of course, Lesotho, Namibia, South Africa, Mauritius, Mayotte, and Réunion. Mayotte and Réunion and Mauritius are those islands that are like going towards the Indian Ocean. So, like I would say, eastern part of South Africa, just that ocean over there. So those countries, obviously very, very important. Botswana, known for its diamond. South Africa, we all know South Africa. Mauritius, Mayotte, Réunion are more holiday resorts. People tend to go there for luxury holidays. Eswatini or Swaziland, small, tiny country, just like Lesotho within South Africa. And then Namibia, which is where you have the Kalahari Desert. It's just north of South Africa, northwest of South Africa. Then in Central Africa, you have the Central African Republic, which was under a bit of a crisis in the last few years. Equatorial Guinea, also in Central Africa. Then you have, going towards West Africa, Sao Tome and Principe. Those islands, small islands, those are also holiday resorts, tend to be holiday resorts. Senegal, far in the west of Africa, one of my favorite places in the world. Morocco and Tunisia in the north. Okay, so those are the three regions where you can travel visa free. Now, there's also a thing called visa on arrival. Visa on arrival is one of those things where if you're a US citizen, British citizen, whatever, you arrive at the airport and then they either stamp it for you or you have to go to one of the kiosks. Like in the case of Egypt, you go to a kiosk, you take $25, they put a visa sticker inside your passport. You go to immigration and you're out. 5-10 minutes, you're done. It's different in other places. But the places that have visa on arrival for US citizens and other people: Republic of Benin, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Ghana, Mauritania, Rwanda, and Egypt. Let me give you another story. Benin, and this is to do with the fact that we as African people, we are our own worst enemies. I flew to Benin in 2017. I've been traveling to Benin by road since the 80s. I lived there as a kid, and I went to school. Togo is right next to Benin, and Benin is between Nigeria and Togo. So we drive from Nigeria to Togo and back and forth. We in Benin, I flew to Benin. They had to check. They kept me. They basically, long story short, they kept me at the airport for 45 minutes with a white woman, a white girl from Canada who came who didn't do the visa on arrival, nothing, didn't even have anything other than her passport. They kept me there for 45 minutes, even though my country's passport is directly neighbors with Benin. So it shows you some of the problems. But of course, if I had a US passport and I just flew in, they would give me the visa on arrival. I'm out of the door in 5 minutes. Okay, so these are some of the problems. But anyway, visa on arrival, those are the few countries that you can go to. I might be missing some of these out because I need to check and see if these are updated. Egypt, did I include Egypt in the visa? Okay, yeah, visa on arrival. I suppose you could include Egypt in that one too. Okay, now in terms of being able to go to Africa, anywhere in Africa, and we do have our own airlines, but there are many airlines that cater to this place. If you want to patronize African airlines, I mean, things are not like they were back in I guess you could say the 80s. In the 80s, you had Nigerian Airways, you had Air Afrique, which was really serviced West Africa, the French-speaking parts of West Africa. You had Ethiopian Airlines was firing at the time. And you had a few others. Now, Air Afrique is not as powerful anymore. In fact, I think they're bankrupt now. Nigerian Airways has just declined. I mean, they vanished maybe 10, 15, no, longer than that. Maybe 20 years ago, Nigeria doesn't have an airline. Big country like that. They don't have a national carrier. Anyway, long story short, there are many airlines that go there. Rwanda Air is a big one. They're a big player in that Eastern African part. They service flights from the UK, from America, going through to the Middle East, so-called Middle East, and right across into Africa as well. So Rwanda, if you want to patronize them, they're there. Ethiopian Airlines is also there. South African Airlines is also there. Which other ones? Now in North Africa, Royal Air Maroc is not my recommendation for anybody, but if you're on a tight budget, it's one of the airlines that you could use. In fact, this lady who I met at the airport in Egypt, she flew Royal Air Maroc. Egypt Air is another one. Egypt Air, obviously from Egypt. What am I missing? What am I missing? Can anybody think of one that I'm missing? So Royal Air Maroc, Egypt Air, Rwanda Air, Ethiopian Airlines, South African Airlines. Okay, a few more. But Delta, British Airways, all of these flights, there are even flights you get directly to different parts of Africa. We'll deal with some of those in a bit. But there are many ways for you to get to Africa. So it's not a question of there is no flights. There are obviously some places that you don't go to and they don't have direct flights. There are some times where you have to get connection flights into Europe, but there are also some flights that you get directly. Okay, so let's deal with the popular places. There are many popular places for you to go to in Africa. And these are just the ones that I have suggested, not because they are my preference, but purely because these are, you guys can't see me. Hang on. Yeah. So just purely because these are places which tend to be very popular. South Africa is a very popular place, Cape Town and Johannesburg in particular. But I think Kenya Airways, thank you, Pepe. Thank you. Yeah, Kenya Airways, absolutely. Turkish Airways is a big player in the game too. In fact, Turkish Airways, of all the others, which are foreign, because Turkish Airways is based out of Turkey, it's probably one of the better airlines that are foreign. Because it's budget friendly, but it's also, it's pretty decent standard. Ataturk Airport, which is the main airport in Istanbul, is a massive airport, very, very luxurious airport. So That's a good airport too. But Kenya Airways, thank you very much for that. So back to my point, popular places like South Africa, Cape Town, and Johannesburg in particular. There's so much stuff to do and see in those places. I put my input, I myself, and to my South African followers and subscribers, I mean no disrespect, but South Africa is not one of those places I immediately run to. For one, it's still, we're 30 years away from apartheid. And I think there is still so much of a stronghold of Europeans that it's not one of the places I instantly want to go to. Now, of course, they're still my people. They have some of the most beautiful landscapes and some of the most beautiful women, for those my brothers who are single, that you will find in Africa. So there are many reasons to go there. But as for me in particular, it's not something which I always run to. Ghana, Accra and Cape Coast. Now you see, Ghana has this Ghana is and oh yeah, I've not even explained the images, have I? Okay, so the you have the statue in the bottom left of Nelson Mandela. That's in Johannesburg, I believe. The one to the right of that is in Zanzibar, but I'll come to that in a second. But Ghana is a Ghana is essentially Accra in terms of what you want to see. In terms of what people tend to see when they go there, they tend to go to Accra and then they drive over to Eastern. I think it's the Eastern region. No, Western region. What's the region where Cape Coast is? Anyway, they drive to Cape Coast, go and see all the Elmina, all that type of stuff, Cape Coast Castle, and then come back to Accra. Okay, so Accra in itself is, Ghana as a nation has done well to rebuild themselves. If you go back 20, 25 years when they were under dictatorship of, if you want to call it dictatorship, J.J. Rawlings, who passed away, I think, last year or the year before. J.J. Rawlings, the economy was really, really bad. For those of you who've been to Ghana, the economy was really, really bad. In fact, when I was in school 20-something years ago, 25 years ago, the Ghanaian cedi was worse than the franc CFA. So in West Africa, you have the franc, which was, let's say, for the sake of argument, I don't know what it is now, but it's like maybe $1 to like 500 CFA now. The equivalent in the cedi at that time would have been $1 to maybe 1,000 cedis. Whereas now they've repaired their currency so well that I think $1 is about 5 or 6 cedis now. At least it was when I was in Ghana some years back, a few years ago. So Ghana is Accra and Cape Coast. Gambia, Banjul. Now Gambia, if you know Gambia, it's a strip of land that follows the River Gambia. It's basically a country within Senegal. Okay, so Gambia itself is they're the exact same people. The Gambians and the Senegalese are the exact same people. But the British came in and took the river part, and the French took the outside part. So you have essentially the same people, but one group of people, the Senegalese, their first language that they write in is French, and the Gambians write in English. But they're the same people. They speak Wolof, same culture essentially. Gambia is a place where people are repatriating to a lot because it has very similar, I suppose, some similarities that it has with the Caribbean in terms of the way the people are laid back, etc. They also have a lock culture. I always talk about this. The Gambians and the Senegalese have a lock culture. Most places in Africa had a lock culture, but it's become taboo with religion. So me, for instance, there are very few places I can go to in Africa with my hair without them thinking I'm a what they call area boy or a criminal or whatever, ganja smoker, whatever they want to call me. But Senegal and Gambia are places where I go there and I feel very much at home. And so even for me as a father of 3 children, 2 of my sons have locks as well. I always think about things like this going forward because they can't go to a regular school in many parts of West Africa, very ultra religious Christian places like Togo, Nigeria or Ghana, because of the stigma associated with this. But at least in Gambia and Senegal, places like that, we feel more comfortable. So people tend to move there. And it's a very small place, very small population. In fact, they recently, a few years ago, had a head of state who was an immigrant in Britain for many years as a security guard, went back and became a president. But for about 30 years, they had a leader called Yahya Jammeh. He was essentially, lack of a better word, a dictator. Then we have Tanzania. Tanzania, two places. Tanzania is on the Swahili coast, what they call the Swahili coast, the far east of Africa. It faces essentially it faces Arabia. So what you had is a lot of Persians coming over there over the last 1,000 years in various periods, and in some ways colonizing it, intermingling. So Tanzania, if you look at even the name Dar es Salaam, Zanzibar, those are Zanzibar is an island off the coast of Tanzania, which is part of it. In fact, they tried to go for their independence back in the 60s, but they have a mixture of Indian, Arabian, and then African people. But it's such a tropical looking place. So people tend to go and live there in peace, all types of people, in particular white people. Dar es Salaam is the capital, so similar sort of thing. But Islam had a bit more stronghold. There is Islam is mostly in Gambia as well, but you don't feel it. It's not oppressive like it is in other parts. Then you have Kenya. Kenya, Nairobi and Mombasa in particular, because of the safari, the wildlife, and so on. But like them, they have Mzungu, the Oyibo people, the white people, tend to go there very often. So it seems like the sort of place where very many when you will go there. Obviously, you feel very African to be there, but the people that will be on your tours with you, on the trips with you, will be mostly white people. Maybe not mostly, but at least a vast majority will be white people. So I think you have to really, and we'll come to my recommendations towards the end, but I think you have to really figure out what it is that you're looking for on your first trip. But Nairobi and Mombasa, absolutely great for safaris. I was born in Kenya, so it's not because I was born there. It's just, I think you can look at the statistics and see that it's one of the places, like we said, with their own airline. So it's easy to travel there from any parts of the world. And then the last one, Egypt. Egypt, I think by far is the most popular, and it's most popular for many reasons. Very few of us actually acknowledge that Egypt is an African civilization. And the reason for that is the blockage, because when we go there, we see mostly Arabic people who are also uneducated about the history. They've been educated by the Europeans also. And so because they've been educated by the Europeans, they tend to think like the Europeans. So they don't really recognize African people built this society. Now, let me say this. I spent 2 weeks there shooting this, my last documentary, four-part series on the Nile Valley. And this is my 5th time going to Egypt. I've been there many times since I was 12 years old. It was the first time I went, but I've also been there with my family, my wife and my kids. And whenever I'm close to the south, which is Upper Egypt, because of the Nile flowing downhill. So Upper Egypt is the higher part towards the south into Africa. Whenever I'm there, people just tend to, when they look at me, they will refer to me as whether it's Ramses or Akhenaten because of the way I look. Now, they're not doing that because they're just trying to compliment me and get a tip. It's because the people in the South recognize, they're darker, by the way. They tend to recognize who these Africans were. Because, again, common sense in Africa is still there, thank God. It's lost everywhere else, but we tend to look at things black and white. So in those parts, in fact, the further south you go in Egypt, Luxor, Aswan, Abu Simbel, the further south you go, the darker it gets. So whenever my brothers and sisters go to Egypt, and I always say Egypt is a pilgrimage site for every black person. Whenever my brothers and sisters go to Egypt, I always tell them, do not stop in Cairo. Go further down into Luxor. And if you can, go further into Aswan. And as a society, Egypt is built around tourism. Its whole economy is built around tourism. So it tends to be one of the safest places you can go of all those places that I've mentioned. Okay, let me move on. Nadia Lineal, good to see you. Thank you so much for sharing this. Yes, my sister, thank you. All right, let's go. So when do you go to Africa? Now, these are based on my own experiences. And as I said at the very beginning, I might be missing some out because I'm not here to try and be an ambassador for any one place. I don't care as long as my people are traveling. I'm more concerned about that. But these are some of my own recommendations, which I think are useful. The times to go to Africa, there are times you can go for partying, but there are also times that you can go there for cultural events. And we have quite a few cultural events going on. These are just five that I know of. I know a few more, but I didn't, we can't keep talking about every single one. Number one is the Voodoo Festival in Benin. Benin is the country where, for those of you who've seen The Woman King, it's based on the Dahomey Kingdom. Up until the 1970s, Benin was called Dahomey. So in the 1970s, they renamed the Republic of Dahomey to Benin. Okay, now Benin, don't be confused. There's also a place in Nigeria called Benin, which was a very famous empire, the Benin Empire. So we had people borrowing names of great civilizations. That happens across Africa, by the way. Great Zimbabwe, for example, the nation of Zimbabwe is not quite where the Great Zimbabwe Empire was. What they call Ghana is based off, it's incorrect, by the way, but it's based off an empire that existed around the area of Mali, the Ghana Empire that predates the Mali Empire that was known for Mansa Musa. So you have the Mali Empire, you have the Ghana Empire, and Ghana is further south, about 1,000, maybe 1,000 kilometers south of Mali, maybe a bit more. Yeah, 1,000 kilometers south. So people borrow names. But the Vodun Festival is the big annual festival. I think it's celebrated every January. It celebrates Vodun. For those of you who have a problem with Vodun, I recommend that you watch my documentary. It's also on the channel where I go into a lot more detail about what Vodun is in Africa. I go to Togo, which is where I went to school, and I go and speak to Vodun priests and so on, and really study the religion. It's a religion, but it's also a cultural practice. You see, religion is the deification of a culture. When we make our culture divine, it becomes a religion. We, unfortunately, are the only people, us Black people, us African people, if you will, who we subscribe to religions that we did not have any part formating. You see, because, and I want you guys, let me even go. I want you guys to understand this. You see, Islam doesn't eat pork because they're from a region in the northeastern, if you want to call it, the northeastern corner of Africa. So pigs are not readily found there. These are desert areas. So it's not to say that the religion, that pork is somehow good. The point I'm making is it's synonymous with the region that these people live in. And so therefore, because pigs don't exist in that particular part of the world, it is unlikely that they will be eaten as part of the culture. Whereas with us, if you go to places like Mali, for example, or you go to places like Benin, where the Dahomey Empire was, you have the snake. The snake is a significant part of their culture. Now, the snake in Christianity is something else, but the snake is readily found in the forest areas of that region. And so it becomes a very important symbol. So what I'm trying to show you is that culture is really formed around your surroundings and the people that are about it. So we, unfortunately, as African people, we're the only ones who we subscribe hook, line, and sinker to something that has nothing to do with our geography, nothing to do with our culture. So it's very important that we keep that in mind, especially when we're talking about festivals like the Voodoo Festival. Okay, so Voodoo Festival, I think, is something which we should experience. It takes place at a place called Ouida. Again, if you watch my documentary, the Dahomey Kingdom, I think Dahomey Kingdom. It ends in Ouida. You can go and see Ouida. Ouida, of course, is again, from the Woman King. That's the town where the many those battles took place between Viola Davis's character and that Oba, the bad person, the bad guy. That Ouida, that town on the coastline, is where many Africans, unfortunately, were taken away. Thank you, Carl Springer. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Next one is the Osun Festival, which takes place later on around August, usually in Nigeria, in Osun State. So Nigeria has a few Yoruba speaking states. Osun is one of them. The Oshun Festival is also a cultural festival, spiritual festival. It's not a, go grab balloons and things like that. It's an actual festival. Vodun festivals are actual. These are spiritual events that you go to. You dress up in a certain outfit, white or whatever, and you go and experience it. These two are great to go to when you know people who are taking you there. The Vodun Festival, maybe you can go on your own. And I know someone from England who did, no real understanding, just went. But then again, people from England do all sorts of stuff. But anyway, number 3, Fespaco. Give me a 1 if you know what Fespaco is. Because Fespaco is that's the top right corner. If you've ever heard of Fespaco, just give me a 1. I attended Fespaco in 2017 for the first time. It is the film festival, the Pan-African Film Festival. Now, it seems like, okay, why would you go to a film festival? Now, Fespaco started in 1969, and it's a biannual event that takes place in a country called Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is just north of Ghana, next to Mali, near Mali. So in West Africa. The film festival brings together all the best filmmakers, all the aspiring filmmakers, and also some African-American filmmakers to this festival that lasts about 2 weeks, where, it's a cultural exchange. People get to have conversations, etc. In fact, if you watch there's a documentary that was made back in 1992, where you have young John Singleton, after making Boys in the Hood, with the great African filmmaker from Senegal called Ousmane Sembène. And you see them having this deep conversation at the very start. It's fascinating. So you have this festival. I think Danny Glover is a big patron of the festival. So Fespaco is also a good time to go. I think they just had it in February. Yeah, it's every 2 years. And it's amazing because you get to be in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is one of the safer countries as well in West Africa. In fact, Burkina Faso gets its name. It used to be called Upper Volta. So when the when the French left it, they called it Upper Volta, as in Upper Volta River, or Volta Lake rather. And then in 1983, they had this coup which brought this man called Thomas Sankara, who was a great Pan-African leader. He's one of the people that tried to stop corruption before he was killed. He died after 3 or 4 years. But he renamed the country the land of the upright. Thank you, Tito. The land of the upright man. Upright man. In fact, there's a documentary about it called Upright Man. The Upright Man. It's a very good documentary you could find. Probably it might be on YouTube. You might be able to find it there. But I advise all of you to go and look into Thomas Sankara. Tito, do me a favor, just put that in the chat for people so they could go and look him up. Thomas Sankara, very important character. So we have Fespaco, and then we also have in Nigeria, we have one called Tinapa. Tinapa Festival, I have a problem with it, by the way, but Tinapa takes place in the eastern part of Nigeria in the region known as Calabar. Calabar is a creeks region, a water region. Thank you, Tito. It's a creeks region, a water region where let's put it this way. People that tend to go to Tinapa Festival tend to be, boisterous young white guys to go and get women, unfortunately. So, let me leave that one. Though I don't want to say you should go, but Calabar is a beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Pepe, the fourth. Calabar is a beautiful area, one of the few places in Nigeria where you can go to and be very proud to be a Nigerian, unfortunately, because it's the government there about 20 years ago really tried to clean the place up. Still got its issues, but it's probably one of the nicer places where you can have. There are other festivals in Nigeria, Durbar Festival in the north, which is an equestrian one about horse riding to do with the caliphates and so on. There are others, but those aren't necessarily the ones you should go to. And then lastly, they have Mombasa Carnival, which is essentially like similar to close to carnivals that you have in the Caribbean. It takes place in Kenya. It's not as popular as you think in any other parts of the world, but over there, I think they value it. All right, let me move on. Spending a lot of time on these points, but let's move on. Now, my people, for those of you, so we're still dealing with, let's go back. So we're still dealing with when to go. Now, there's a thing that we have in West Africa called Dirty December. Okay. Dirty December takes place around Christmas time going into New Year. It really kicked off. I mean, first of all, so culturally in Africa, most parts of Africa anyway, Christmas time, we go back to our villages or we go back to our hometowns, right? This is how it was even when I was a kid. That's what people used to do. We didn't used to do it, but many people, they go back home to the village. Over the last 10 years or so, with the rise of Afro beats, with the kind of like aspiration to be like the West, people tended to just go, instead of going back to their village, they just go back to Lagos, or they go to Lagos, or they go to Accra, or they go to Kinshasa, or they go to wherever. So this Dirty December thing started developing. So now people go back to Lagos and they go back to Accra for partying. Now, over the last 5 or 6 years, especially with the rise of the year of return, which took place in 2019, Ghana became the more prominent one. And so what tends to happen now around December, January, is you have music festivals. You have Afrochella, which is, us Africans, we must copy. So Afrochella, we have, I think they use Afrochella and Afro Nation, which is a big festival that takes place in Europe. I think same sort of company. You have Afrochella, you have these all-white parties, you have all these celebrities coming from all around the Black diaspora to come and party in Ghana. Nigeria, of course, is annoyed because the artists that tend to perform at Afrochella tend to be overwhelmingly Nigerian, but no one really goes to Nigeria. And that's largely to do with the safety. But Nigerians in the diaspora go to Nigeria, go to Lagos. I know, it's only an hour, like a 50-minute flight between Lagos and Accra anyway. So it's not far. But people tend to try and do both. But there are some that try to do both. But really, people go to Lagos and Accra to party. Make no mistake about it. There's no cultural exchange. Now, the thing that you might find in Accra is when people go to Ghana for Dirty December, they might go do those. You've probably seen it on social media. People going to Cape Coast Castle, Elmina Castle, and seeing and crying and so on. So that tends to be what people do, and that gives them their cultural fix. Lagos itself has a lot of history, but people don't really know about it. And I think that's part of the problem, I think, because Lagos itself also is not as safe as Ghana is. And I have to be honest with you. Lagos is not as safe. Nigeria is not as safe as Ghana in general. So that creates a problem for us going forward because we have so much to offer, but until we fix the safety aspect, it's going to be difficult to attract tourists unless you already know somebody. But people still go to Nigeria. We still have the biggest parties. We still invite people from all over the world. But for the most part, I would say as a Nigerian, Nigeria is not a very safe country. Doesn't mean you can't party there, but I have to be honest. So Dirty December. So you're either going to Africa for a cultural event like the Voodoo Festival or some of the others that I mentioned, or you're going in December for the strict purpose, and I wrote down strictly for partying and vibes. So if that's what you want to go for, go in December. Of course, you should avoid the rainy season. Those of you who are in particular in West Africa, you know that our rainy season is nothing to joke about. The rainy season tends to run in West Africa from around April, so around now to around give or take September, October. I'm just being conservative. Now, because of global warming, it either gets very intense or it's not as much. So it just depends. For instance, I was supposed to be in Nigeria now filming something, but because the rainy season just started badly in this particular part, it just started too intensely. Normally, it slowly builds. I couldn't go. So the rainy season is actually a major issue because also, again, the infrastructure is not designed to take all that water. So what you tend to have in places like Nigeria is a lot of flooding. But also the rain itself is very intense. It's not to say it's freezing, but it's very intense. In East Africa, the rainy season tends to run from around, actually they have two rainy seasons, if you will, in Eastern Africa. So in places like Central East Africa, places like Rwanda, they tend to have one at the start of the year, around the same time. So say like April till around uh, August, and then another one from October to like March. Okay, so those are two. It's roughly the same sort of period, but the rain is intense. Okay, we're talking about tropical climates, so when it rains, it pours literally. Of course, Northern Africa, it's not so much rain, but it's more the temperate climate. So Northern Africa, Egypt, and places like that are along the Mediterranean, so they have a very similar to a European climate. Summers are intensely hot. So Egypt, for example, people often tell you don't go to Egypt during the summer because it's super hot. I don't think that's necessary. I think you can go whenever. Um, oh, sorry. I think you can go whenever. Morocco, places like that. But Egypt also has its winter time. I was there in December, and you'll see it also in my documentary when it comes out. There is a lot of jacket wearing. You know, it's not enough for you to wear your jacket the whole day. It's not that bad. Eventually, during the afternoon, you could take your jacket off. So it's still African climate. But the further south you go, of course, the warmer you go. The further north you go, the colder it gets. Okay, so it has that Mediterranean climate in the north and a more African climate in the south. Places like Senegal as well, by the way, even though they're in West Africa in the far west, most westerly city is Dakar. Most westerly city in Africa is Dakar. It also gets quite cold there around December, January time. Okay, so keep those things in mind. But generally, you want to avoid the rainy season. Okay, unless you're going for like a quick 5 or 6 day trip and you're going to party, in which case, ignore what I've just said. Now, must see places. My people, I have to emphasize this, okay? Because I really, really believe that we're, as African people, we really need to prioritize going to Africa and seeing some of the things that we've read in books, that we've heard people talk about. It's so important that we prioritize in our lifetime to go and see these places. A lot of us have a desire to go to Greece and go to Paris and go to these places. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong there. But I think especially if you grow up in Babylon, so if you grow up in the UK, you grow up in France, you grow up in America, you grow up in Brazil, you grow up wherever. When you grow up in Babylon, if you can afford it and you have the passport to travel, you're better off going and seeing everything you need to see in Africa and then going to see all those things in Europe. I think it's very important. I think we can't sugarcoat this anymore. We need to start being better at knowing about home. We cannot afford to allow people to keep telling us what home is like. We need to be able to describe what our places look like. And so that said, I want to just bring up a few of my favorite places, which I think should be on everybody's must-see list. Mali, Djenné, the city of Djenné. For those of you who've seen my documentary, Djenné and the Dogon, my documentary is a 40-minute documentary, 35-minute documentary where I travel from the capital city of Mali, West Africa, to the city of Djenné. Djenné is a very important city. So is Timbuktu, actually. I go to Timbuktu as well. But Djenné in particular, because I think Timbuktu, the issues with Timbuktu, I think seeing Timbuktu is important, but I think because you've heard of it so much in books, you would want to go there. I always wanted to go there. But Djenné in particular, because they have this mud-built mosque, which is in the bottom right picture for those of you who can see it. This mud-built mosque, and I go inside it in the documentary. I do a proper tour around the mosque so you can see it, and I break down the history and how it's developed. This mosque is next to the Library of Djenné, where some of the great books that were written in the Middle Ages were created and housed for many, many centuries. So Djenné is one of those places I recommend that you go and see one day in your lifetime. Global Citizen, again, thank you, my brother. I appreciate this. I learned a lot about the culture and I want to go. Thank you very much, brother. All right. So Jene in particular. Same documentary, I go to a place called Banyagra. Bandiagra is a place called a place also in Mali where the Dogon people come from. The Dogon are those famous people who are known for being able to see Sirius, which is the invincible star naked to the human eye. They're the few people that are able to see this star called Sirius. Now so if you look at the picture on the bottom left-hand side, they have these in fact, I interview them. I go to Bandiagra as well in the documentary. So check it out. Check all these documentaries out. Maybe I'll link them in the chat somewhere. Or anybody, if somebody else can help me link them, please, while I do this. But it's very important that you start to look at these places and understand, because the significance of the Dogon, for those of you who study astronomy, astrology, even NASA, organizations like this talk about the Dogon and how important they are to understanding modern sciences, modern astronomy, modern astrology. So it's very important that we as African people take pride, take ownership of these places and go and see them with our own naked eyes. So Jene and Bandiagra in Mali. Mali has gone under all sorts of problems the last decade. So it's not what it used to be. It's not as safe as it used to be. But Jene and Bandiagra, you could still get to just about. Again, you need contacts on the ground. Secondly, Egypt. Abu Simbel, top right picture. I cannot emphasize to you, my people, the importance of seeing Abu Simbel. Again, there is no mistake that when Ramses II decided to build this temple overlooking the Nile River as far south in ancient Egypt, or aka Kemet, he did it because he recognized this is where his people were from. So when you walk there and you walk towards this temple and you look up and you see the 4 statues of this African man, you cannot deny it. It's ironic that none of these temples still exist further north. Of course, they weren't built for it further north. The only thing that you could really recognize is the Sphinx, Horemheb, who is Heru on the horizon, which is basically the statue of Khafre, the second king, from the 4th dynasty. That they knocked off the nose. Had they gone further south, if they'd gone further south enough and seen all of this, they would have knocked that off too. But of course, by that point, they couldn't. But anyway, when you go to Abu Simbel and you see this, it is fascinating. And then when you go around the corner and see the temple that was made for his wife, the temple of Isis that they made for that he made for his wife, you start to see that our people have done great things on this continent. Then there's the Giza complex. I didn't put it there because you've all seen what it looks like online. Giza complex is where you have the 3 pyramids. Really, there are 9 pyramids, but the 3 main pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkore. And then you have Horemheb, which is the Sphinx. When you go and see that, these are wonders of the world, right? And wonders of the ancient world too. In the ancient world, people also wanted to go and see these things. So I think those are useful to go and see. I haven't put it there because I don't think it's that crazy. But if you look at the top left image, is, it doesn't really matter where it is, but it's the Nile River. You have to go and experience the Nile River. There are 2 rivers you have to experience in Africa. I don't want to my East Africans and my South Africans, I'm not trying to criticize any of you with the Zambezi and so on, but I'm talking specifically because most of my people from Africa, from most of my African Americans and people in the Caribbean, people in South America and Central America would most likely originate in Central or Western Africa. So go and see the Niger River. The Niger River you must go and experience as well in your lifetime. Okay, let me move quickly. So where else? Senegal, Gorée Island. Okay, I'm not a big proponent of all this like slavery stuff, but I recognize that's not my own direct connection. In fact, it's not even because of that. I think also you need to have the right tour guide going there. I've said this many times on my lives. I don't believe in tour guides. I think go with someone who knows the knowledge, because tour guides regurgitate the information that UNESCO has given them. These are all UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So UNESCO essentially pays to maintain all these sites all across Africa. And because of that, they create the book, if you will, the template, if you will, of what people are supposed to say. So it tends to be not very real or honest. Okay, they tend to paint it as very black and white picture. Africans sold Africans, that sort of thing. But Gore Island is one which even me, and I've been to many. I've been to Cape Coast Castle. I've been to Elmina. I've been to so many of these places. But Gore Island was the one that hit me the most. It's an island just off the coast of Senegal. You have to take off the coast of Dakar. You have to take a ferry, about a 20-minute ferry across. And when you see the sheer evil, if you want to talk about the gate of no return, the place in Cape Coast, for those of you who've been to Cape Coast, where you literally you see where people walk onto the shoreline. In Gore Island, it's literally a window or a door, and if you jump down, you're in the rock, you hit the jagged rocks below and you die. The waves and the tides will kill you. So you can imagine how many people either fell, were pushed, or committed suicide because they didn't want to go. So it's one of those places where it's such a beautiful island, by the way. That's the picture in the middle there. It's such a beautiful island in terms of even when you walk around it now, but it's just the horror that people must have endured going there. To the right of it is the Gate of Return, which is found in Ouida, the city that I was talking about earlier in Benin, former Dahomey. The Gate of Return is right on the beach. Again, if you watch my documentary, Dahomey Kingdom, at the very end of that documentary, you see me walk through it. Okay. And then on the left-hand side, we have the city of Kigali, Rwanda. Rwanda has become a success story over the last 20 years. We've talked about it before on a different live some weeks ago. But Kigali is very important if you want to understand how cities can go from nothing to something with very little resources. We know about places like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, and those places have an oil to back them. Rwanda essentially did this a very different way. And I think for the sake of seeing how an African society, which for those of you who at least were around in the 90s, when you see how bad things were for them, it's encouraging to see that they can go and transform themselves to become this metropolis, this great city, one of the best places to do business in Africa, a tech hub, etc. And only God knows what will happen in the next 10 or 20 years, not just to the country, but to the region, because of the success story of Rwanda and the city of Kigali. So those are two other places. Now, the third for me is the most important, and it's similar to the Egypt thing. Ethiopia, Kush, if you want to call it that, part of Kush. Ethiopia and Egypt are the two you would call the oldest civilizations you find in Africa. Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan, that region. So the Meroe, Kush, those civilizations, Kemet, those civilizations are significant. They're mentioned. Kemet is mentioned in the Bible. Ethiopia is mentioned in the Bible. So it's important to understand how significant these places are to the history that we have been given, but also factual history. Okay, because there's fictional history and then there's factual history. And Ethiopia is relevant in both. So it's important to go and see places like Lalibela. I put the text blocking, but anyway, what you have is this structure that is built in a pit. It's a church formed around a cross. They also have places like Aksum, where you see these big obelisks. They have big palaces. They also have a church up in the mountain. I mean, you have to think of the incredible ingenuity to think like that, but also to go and make these things a reality and to maintain them for thousands of years. Ethiopia is one of those places. For me personally, I've been there to the airport, but I've never actually been there, like into the country as an adult anyway. That it's, for me, it's high up on my bucket list, and I think it should be for all of you. All right. Now, coming up to the end, my top 5 places in no particular order for first time visitors. Okay. So for me, I think we have to look at it from a point of view of if you're going there for the first time, you don't really know anybody, you're not going as part of any tour. And so what you do is you go online, you book a package deal to fly to wherever. Where are 5 places you can go? And so for me, I would recommend that the 5 places that you could go are Kenya, because of the safety aspect, because of the fact that you could do the safari, because of the fact that you have access to the beach where you could be on the coastline facing uh, 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 facing the you're on the Swahili coast, facing the Arabian Peninsula / the Indian Ocean. I think it's a very important place for you to go to get a start. But also it's important because Kiswahili Kiswahili is one of the most, I think something like 150 million. So about 15% of Africans speak Kiswahili. So it's a very important language for those of you who went to HBCUs back in the 80s and the 90s. I don't know about now. This is a language that was offered because it's very important. I think there are probably 3 or 4 language groups that you could find across Africa that if you made them a regional language, it would make sense. Kiswahili is spoken in Kenya, it's spoken in Tanzania, it skips over Uganda a little bit, it's spoken in DRC. So that as a regional language could be so vital to Africans from a point of view of economics. But we haven't got there yet, but we will. So the language is important. The coastline, the fact that you could go on safaris, but also the fact that you're around mostly Black people. Kenya, of course, has its issues with race too. There are the white settlers who settled there and called it Kenya, by the way. Kenya, very arrogant English people. And really still have a bit of a stronghold there. Indians have a bit of a stronghold there, even though they were exiled, a lot of them from there and Uganda in the 70s. They still have a bit of a not enough. And of course, there's a new head of state. He was the former vice president. What's his name again? William Ruto, who's also a decent guy. Somebody says, I'm surprised South Africa and Namibia didn't make the list. I'll explain that. Thank you for bringing that up. Then Egypt. Sorry. So go back to Kenya. Kenya, July to September, good time to go there. The holidays are coming up. Book a package deal. They tend to be quite expensive for most places because obviously the packages include all the safari and so on. Egypt, anytime. I think Egypt you can go to anytime. And I think Egypt is one of the few places which you absolutely do not need to know anybody there. It helps if you do, of course, but you don't need to know anybody there. There are enough tour packages that take you there. There are tour packages that could take you from Cairo by cruise all the way up the Nile, south, up the Nile into Upper Egypt. Up the Nile into Upper Egypt, and you pass places like Luxor, you pass places like Aswan, you go to places like Abu Simbel, and the packages range from 5-star to 0-star, so it's very affordable. And also there's something for you to see. You will feast your eyes if you go to Egypt. You will feast your eyes on things. You will not stop looking. There's enough to see. But this is obviously for people who like a little bit of history, but also like a little bit of culture. There's a lot of Arabic culture in the north, and the further south you go, the more Black it gets. When you go into Nubia, it becomes more African. It becomes more of a place. Global citizen is a single woman. My bad, my sister. Okay, I'll take the question in a minute. Just bear with me. Let me just finish the list. Egypt, any time of the year, I think you should go to. Ghana, I think only in December. Why? Because you will have enough people coming from the States, coming from the UK, coming from wherever it is that you're coming from in the diaspora, that there will be enough connections for you to make. Otherwise, going to Accra is not that. Oh no, I was gonna say it's not too dissimilar from going to Lagos. It is, It's actually pretty. It's a decent place. Accra is a lot more. Ghanaians in general a lot more calm, a lot more safer place to go. But I think I would recommend going to places like Ghana in December, unless you go through a tour. And I said this on my last live when I was explaining to you about the Sankofa journey. Kwame, are you still in the chat? I don't know if you can give some information about the Sankofa journey, Kwame. But it's a Sankofa journey, which is an annual trip that's done. A friend of mine, Dr. Kambon, runs it from Ghana. They've been, I think, last year or the year before, they went to Benin and Togo, but they also do them around Ghana too. So if you go through a tour operator, Ghana is a good place. Number 4, Senegal. Senegal, for me, Dakar in particular is the most interesting place to be. It's not incredible in terms of touristiness, but if you want to get the vibe of I live here, if you want to feel like you live there, if you want to feel like you live in Africa, Dakar makes you feel welcome. Because Dakar, even though it's a French colonized city, Senegal is colonized by the French. So French is supposed to be the language. Most people speak Wolof, but so many more people speak English, which is a rarity. If you go to places like Benin, right next to Nigeria, you have a few more people who speak English because they're so close to a big juggernaut like Nigeria. But if you go to places like Togo, a few of them might speak English because they're next to Ghana. But you go to places like Ivory Coast, next to Ghana, they don't really speak English like that. When you go to other places, they don't really speak English, Guinea-Bissau, etc. But Senegal, you can find a vast array of culture. I met a Rwanda when I was last there. I met a guy from Rwanda who moved and settled there. You find a lot of European people moving there because it's one of the few places also in Africa that's never had any war. You know, people think everywhere in Africa you fight, but no, Senegal is one of the few places had no wars. Okay, don't forget at colonialism they had. After colonialism ended, they had a dictator until the 1980s, Leopold Senghor, and was it 80s or the 90s? I can't remember. So, and he was a poet. He was somebody who loved France. So what he did is he opened the floodgates for France to come in and make it a secondary French colony, which they tend to do across West Africa, by the way. If you go to Togo, Benin, Ivory Coast, Ivory Coast, Abidjan is the capital of Ivory Coast. They call it Petit Paris, small Paris or little Paris. So French people take a hold, but Senegal in particular is like their nugget. So it's safe. You could go to the beach in Senegal. You can go to a bar in Senegal and listen to salsa. You can listen to Cuban music. You can listen to hip hop. You can listen to whatever, and always will find somebody that speaks English. So Dakar, Senegal is beautiful. I would say avoid the winter. For those of you on the East Coast, I'm sure winter, it's nothing like the winter you experience. For me, I don't like any cold whatsoever. I don't like wearing a jacket. As you can see, I dress in my house like how I dress back home. So, I like to be very, very free. But the winter is not the best, November to January, but it's warm the rest of the time. Number 5 is Morocco. I've put Morocco on the list because, and I was in Morocco in just last January. Look, it's on the African continent. Okay. But again, we're talking about the 5 people who are going there for the first time. If you want to experience Africa, yes, you get a slight taste with the Berbers and the people in places like Agadir and Marrakesh, where they feel a little bit more African. It's still very Islamic, but you feel a little bit more African. It's also a place which is the king of Morocco has completely adjusted his country for the sake of tourism. So again, it tends to be very safe. You still get the sunlight of Africa. And then, in fact, further south, you've got a place called Western Sahara, which is, I guess it was called Spanish West Africa, or whatever it was called before. But it's a colony, if you will, of Morocco. So there you can find a few more black people. But Morocco, you'll find a lot of Senegalese migrants, Malian migrants who live there in the south. But it's still a nice. Morocco tends to be a lot more relaxed than the other Arabic countries in northern Africa, and the city of Agadir or Marrakesh. Those are places that you can go and check out. So, things to prepare before you go. I'm gonna get to your questions, guys. Please don't forget to hit the super chats. If you feel like you need to. or if you feel like you want to, rather. All right, things to prepare before going. Now, again, I'm talking about people going for the first time. These are just some handy tips. You may not already have a trip planned, but if you do plan a trip, go back and look at these. Go back and watch this video just so you can understand some of the things that might be useful for you. Number one, take an Android. Uh, when I say an Android, it doesn't have to be like a Samsung or anything. Just it tends to be better to go. Androids tend to work better. Remember, the economy in many parts of Africa, if you look in terms of GDP, we're quite low in terms of the world scale. We don't earn that much, so people tend to afford Android phones. So in hotels, you'll find sometimes that when you connect to the Wi-Fi, they kick your iPhone out sometimes. Whereas with Androids, they tend to connect automatically. Plus, it's also something where you don't want to take a £1,000 iPhone, $1,000 iPhone rather, and then you might lose it or whatever. It's no point. You could still take it. I'm not saying don't, but take an Android phone or a phone which allows you to have dual SIMs, so you have both your numbers in the phone. Get a local SIM. In most places, in places like Morocco, for example, you arrive at the airport, they'll give you a SIM. You go to Egypt, you can get a SIM for the equivalent of 50 cents or a dollar. You get a SIM card. Load it with data. You go to Nigeria, same thing. Ghana, it doesn't really matter where you go. You can get SIMs for very, very cheap, and always use those. Don't use your international calling, because for some reason, companies in the West haven't figured out how to sort things out with Africa in terms of phones. Data is a very expensive thing in many parts of Africa. It's one of the big issues that tech companies are trying to solve. Not everywhere, but it tends to be an issue. So when you go, get a local SIM when you arrive. Number 3, no Airbnbs. Again, this is the first timers. I'm not talking about those people who are regulars or who are going with people. If you're going on your own, don't do Airbnb. And I say don't do Airbnb not because it's not safe or anything. Depends on where you go as well. But don't do Airbnb. Go to a hotel. And when you pick a hotel, don't try and be cheap. Go for 3-star or above. I have never ever gone to a place where I have expected a 3-star to be even remotely close to a 3-star in the West. And by the way, in the West, 3 stars are even declining. But always go 3-star or above if you can afford it. Okay. If you're one of those people who don't mind slumming it, then that's a different story. But 3-star or above, you'll find a lot of European people, French, English people, they'll stay in hostels anywhere in Africa. They'll pay peanuts because they want to go travel around. Our people are not like that. You don't want to be using a bucket to wash in the shower in a hotel. So 3-star or above. Number 4, reach out to your network. I have to emphasize this point as well. You have to make sure that when you are going to anywhere in Africa, that you at least put the feelers out on your WhatsApp or whatever, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Just find out who you know, because you will always have somebody who might know someone who's there, who can look after you. Or not just look after you, but who could take you out. Because also it's about how you spend money when you go to these places. You don't want to be treated as a tourist. Wherever I go, I always make sure that I have somebody local. I'll give you my story with Mali. I went to Mali and I really wanted to go into Timbuktu. Now, flights had been banned because there were some bombings going on. Flights have been banned. So there are no airlines that you used to be able to go by river to Timbuktu, but it was off limits. And I remember reaching out to Dynas Demir. For those of you who know Dynas Demir, I reached out to him online. I was like, because I saw him, he had been to Mali. I was like, look, do you know anyone who could help me get there? Whatever. And he put me in touch with some guy, and the guy was like, no, I can't really, we don't go that far because of the problems. Ironically, when I arrived, things escalated to a new level. But I had a friend who I knew from years ago, who he told me, look, just come, I will take you everywhere. And lo and behold, when we got to Mali, we went by road in these desert trucks. Me and like 20 other people in these trucks sat there driving through the desert, no roads, whatever. And we got to Timbuktu. It was scary. It could have been scary, but we experienced it. We really, really experienced trying to go to Timbuktu, and we got there. Now, when I left, they blew the airport up. Luckily, the day I left, but I wasn't there. But anyway, so yeah, local people will help you get to the places and see the things that you want to see. Again, always withdraw local cash only when you are going out. Don't have big wads of cash and don't have dollars either. This is 2020. Well, yeah, we're in 2023. You don't need to be carrying dollars with you when you're going. You might need some dollars. Like, again, if you're going to Egypt, you need to have $25 when you arrive at the airport so you can get your visa. They don't take cards at all. But withdraw local cash only on the days that you're going out. Don't have wads of cash. Second to last, get a Monzo account. I don't know if there's a different one for you guys, but we have this thing called Monzo. Where's my wallet? It's like basically an online bank. Okay, it's an online bank. You basically, and they basically give you favorable exchange rates depending on the country that you go to. Okay, so rather than taking your usual bank account, you transfer some money into your Monzo account, and you can withdraw cash anywhere, right? And it's much more better exchange rates, etc. Okay, so it stops you from having cash. And in places where you pay by card, you could just use your Monzo card. But again, places like Egypt, Morocco, even not Nigeria, Ghana, you could use your usual card like you use in the States. You use cards in all these other places, but some other places have issues. So use your Monzo or alternate online card provider. And the last one, don't be afraid to try local food. Top right corner, you can see the suya. Suya is our grilled spicy meat that's famous in Nigeria. It looks scary, the way we use things, but Africans are very, very hygienic people. You might see them using their hands and stuff like that. If you go to a Michelin star restaurant, you have these chefs using their hands to grab your food and put it on your plate and decorate it. I don't think they wash their hands half as much as we do in Africa. But anyway, don't be afraid to try local food. And last slide, let 2023 be your year of return. Okay, my people, I really, really think we're only in April. Still have 8 months left of the year. Go and try and make a trip. Get a trip booked. It doesn't matter where you go. Start small. Go to Morocco. Morocco might seem small. Go to Morocco. Go. You don't have to go to one of the intense places. Book a tour operator. Again, I will put some details as to how to book various packages in the chat. Check those out. But it's so important that you start getting into the booking. All right, so let me start dealing with your questions. So thank you very much, everybody. Let me just go through your questions one by one, if you don't mind, and then we will wrap up. Okay, so these comments I've read. Where are we? Okay, so Salamawit Dyer, excuse me. I'm surprised South Africa and Namibia didn't make the list. Okay. South Africa, without question, is a very popular place for you to go and visit. So is Namibia. Namibia also, there's so much to see, the wildlife, the Kalahari Desert, etc. South Africa, there's so much, including safaris and so on. I started this show, I mentioned that I don't promote South Africa that much because I've never been there, but also I don't. I think South Africa is a complicated place, and I think you have to have been there. I've never been to anywhere in Southern Africa. You have to have been there to really understand it. So, by all means, South Africa is there, but I think it's also, again, I'm speaking primarily to my brothers and sisters in America. At least from my understanding, South Africa is not quite, because South Africa is still mostly dominated, at least economically, by the European people, that the Afrikaners, the descendants of the Boers. It's still dominated by them. They still tend to dominate the economy. You might have a head of state that is African. You might have even when you look at the parliamentary organization, there are still a lot of white voices. So for an African American going back home, South Africa is more of asks more questions about Africa. It creates more issues where you start. It's easy for you to start looking at South Africa and saying, okay, this isn't too dissimilar to what I see in America. And what I'm trying to say is, I want you to get away from that and see raw Africa. Also, South Africa is far more developed. It's probably the biggest economy, way more developed. They had a World Cup there, by the way. So it's a very developed society in comparison to the rest of Africa. And really, what I want you to go and see is Africa. Africa degraded, poor Africa, African people, in the society, running every aspect of the economy. And that's why I put Rwanda in the list, because Rwanda is one of the economies that is completely African and is run by Africans, but it's also thriving. So that's the reason why. Okay, so global citizen, my bad, my sister. I've been calling you my brother the whole evening with my sister. As a single woman, what tips do you recommend if I want to go to Senegal or any country in general? Okay, Senegal, I will. For those of you, I'm gonna get Demba. If you go back a few years ago, I did a live with a guy called Demba. The reason why I did this live weeks after I initially intended was I was trying to get Demba back on. Demba and I have started a sort of, what do you want to call it? Like, I'm sort of consulting, like a consultancy. He has a concierge service where his clients are mostly businessmen, but he's trying to bring people from the diaspora over. So I will put you in touch with Demba if that is what you want to do, global citizen. But in terms of tips going to Senegal, Senegal is not a particularly, Dakar in particular is not a very difficult place to visit. It's very, very relaxed. What you have to be careful of is, like everywhere else, is crime at night time. Generally speaking, let me not paint any rosy pictures. It's not that safe. I remember when I was last in Dakar, a friend of mine had her niece who goes to university there. By the way, she's a Tunisian girl, so an Arab girl, white girl, but she goes to university in Senegal. So it just shows you the sort of society it is. And she lived like maybe just across the way from us, maybe about a 15-minute walk. And I'd have to walk her across because it's my friend's niece. So I'd have to walk her across. At times I didn't feel that comfortable, so just being honest, and this is in the posh area. This is the, what's the name of the area again? By the beach, where you have the Radisson Blue Hotel. I forget the name. Anyway, but so I would say just keep your wits about you, but also pays to know people. But my kids go to a Pan-African Saturday school, Pan-African school here used to anyway. And one of the girls was telling me that she went on her own, so it's again, don't be afraid. Again, do your research and know somebody there that can at least be your guide. And there are few African American people that have moved over there. There are also people in Gambia. Gambia and Senegal are very interconnected. Remember, I said Gambia is within Senegal, technically speaking. So those are my tips for you. Souls of our ancestors, good to see you. Long time. What about solo travelers like myself? Okay, so if you're a solo traveler, okay. The first question I always ask, because if you're a black person, have you been to Egypt? It's so important that you go and see Egypt, even if you don't do the whole Nile. You don't go Alexandria all the way down to Abu Simbel. It's so important that you go and see key landmarks in Egypt. Number one. Number two, West Africa is so important. One thing I haven't talked about a lot in West Africa is the West African Highway. Going by road from Nigeria into Benin, into Togo, and into Ghana is the most beautiful experience I've ever had in my entire life. I did this journey for many, many years going to school. Essentially, what you have when you're going west from Nigeria, you have the beach to your left, and to your right, you have African life just going on. It's the most beautiful journey. Now, because of the Nigerian border being like closed, people tend to go by water to Benin and then drive. But that journey in itself, by the way, a very short journey from Lagos you could get to Aflao border, which is the border between Togo and Ghana. You can get there within 9 hours if you're in a private car. And essentially what happens is when you get to the borders, you just walk across. It's just such a beautiful experience, especially for people who are growing up in America. When you cross the border from one country into another, you walk along with the people selling their fruits, people selling their things, crossing across the border for who are commuting for work, it's just such a beautiful experience. And then you get in the cars and you drive along the road. You drive along the highway, the West African highway, and you're just seeing these kids play on the side of the road. And on the left hand side, you have raw beach. So I think, again, that one is also something you should experience. But I definitely recommend, I've already recommended Senegal in West Africa. For cultural experiences, FESPACO, the film festival, is a unique opportunity for you to go to a part of West Africa that is landlocked. Burkina Faso is a very unique place. Burkina Faso, what you'll find is you have a lot of women in positions of trade and business for some reason. So you see a lot of in West Africa, there's a big thing about motorcycle taxis. We call them Okada in Nigeria, but motorcycle taxis, you can see a lot of them. But you tend to see women using these motorcycle taxis, doing on these motorcycles. These little, they're really not, they're like 50cc bikes. They're not really motorcycles. But anyway, Burkina Faso is a good experience because you're around the film festival. You're also seeing a lot of different people. So that's one of those places you should put for your calendar, but it's not for another 2 years. Where else? Ghana. I've already talked about. Ivory Coast too is a place to go to, but again, need to know a few more people. Where else? So yeah, so Senegal, Gambia, Burkina Faso, Egypt. Hi, Morocco is one of those places you can go to at any point in time. It's so well structured around tourism. You can go there at any point in time. Egypt, the same thing. The problem with Egypt is there's so much to see. You have to plan it and you have to budget accordingly. But so that's my advice. I hope that helps. Where are we? Master Monkey, can I come if I'm not African? Of course you can. Jack Jackson. I'm African American. In 2021, I went to Sierra Leone and got my citizenship because of my mother's roots. Okay. I want to do work in Sierra Leone when I retire at the end of the year, but I need a home base. Yeah, Sierra Leone is 20 years ago, they were in a state of war. You still have a lot of the remnants of it, children with the chopped hands, ex-child soldiers, etc. But I mean, in terms of beaches, it's got some of the most natural, beautiful beaches you'll find in West Africa. It's an up-and-coming nation. Again, once we get the leadership right in Africa, oh my God. And this is the thing. Everybody's running to the UAE, running to Qatar, running to Saudi in a way, running to Oman and all these places now. But 20, 30 years ago, nobody was checking for these places because they hadn't figured it out yet. Africa is in that similar place right now where in 30 years' time, it could look very, very different. Look at how Nigeria, as bad as the economy is, as bad as the leadership is, we've managed to make it a tourist destination for music. It is the music hub in Africa. Look at Ghana. From nowhere, 20 years ago, again, Ghana was, laughing stock of West Africa. From nowhere, this has become a place where the last 4 years, it's the destination every December. So there's a lot to see. Senegal, I think they're doing a lot of art exchanges. I think Alicia Keys and Swiss Beats, they go and do these art exchanges with these artists over there. Senegalese people who emigrated to New York are starting to come back. You see what Akon is doing there, Also, the leadership, Macky Sall, president of Senegal, whether you like him or not, by the way, has made it convenient for anybody to go to Senegal. I can go to Senegal. I have another funny story about traveling to Senegal, by the way. I can go to Senegal with any passport and be allowed in. Let me tell you my story quickly, if we have time. So I went to Senegal thinking that I need because I have Nigeria is in West Africa. We're part of this thing called ECOWAS. So you should be able, in theory, to travel anywhere with West Africa. So I get to Dakar and I see the queue for like non-ECOWAS people, full of white people. It's like 100, 150 people. So I'm like, I'm not queuing there. I look at the queue for ECOWAS people, 0. It's like one guy. I'm like, okay, cool. Let me take my Nigerian passport, go over there. Big mistake. Again, there's a problem we have with passports. They saw my Nigerian passport, all of a sudden start asking me, where am I going to stay? I need to call the people and prove that. So anyway, so these are the kind of things that we go through. But Senegal has made it convenient for you with a US passport or a British passport to just easily go into the country and just be happy. So I highly, highly recommend checking that out too. Okay, Pepe the Fourth, you haven't mentioned yellow fever vaccine, and okay, so yellow fever vaccine is so it's one of the vaccinations that you need for a lot of places in West Africa. So Nigeria, they tend to only ask people who are foreigners. Okay, so if you, they don't really, even in Nigeria, did they really ask you for it anymore? But going into Benin, so Nigeria is right next to Benin, Togo, those sort of francophone or French speaking countries, they tend to ask for that yellow fever vaccine. Now, the yellow fever vaccine is a jab which you can take anywhere. It provides you immunity for, I think it's malaria and various other diseases that are synonymous with that part of West Africa. Now, again, if you have an exemption, you don't need to have it. Like again, Dr. Campbell, my buddy, his children have an exemption, so he doesn't necessarily need it, or he doesn't use it. He just shows the exemption when he passes. But these things are not major deals, my people. Why do you prefer hotels to Airbnb? Also, what is your cash app if you have? Oh, thank you, Tito, my brother. I'll put the cash app at the end for you to see. Now, oh, here it is. Now, the reason why I prefer, this is just my own preference. Again, if you're going there on your own, and it really depends where you're going. I'm not trying to say that this is for. I'm not trying to say that this is for every single person, but if you're going there for your first time, Airbnbs are very different to, so an Airbnb in Europe will be similar to an Airbnb in America in terms of the way things are run and built. But if you're in West Africa, for instance, you get an Airbnb, unless you're going to a high-end one. Let's say you're in Lagos and you're going to an Airbnb in Ikoyi or even in Ikoyi, these are the island areas of Lagos, the wealthy parts. Unless it's like a brand new build, you'll find that there will be slight issues with things. There's a thing we have, and I don't want to paint a picture that's incorrect, but I have to be honest with you. We have a tendency towards mediocrity. Unfortunately, when things in terms of our carpentry, our plumbing, our architecture, even our mechanics, there's a mediocrity that we tend to exhibit in West Africa. We are not the people that built the pyramids. Make no mistake about that. The people that built the pyramids, they didn't pass that on to us. Okay. We are people who were taught by Europeans. And so when we are not getting paid like Europeans, there's a shortcut nature. So what I mean is you'll see a pair, you call somebody to fix your stairs, put some stairs in. He'll put one stair that's straight and another stair on top of it that's slightly slanted. Okay. This is the mediocrity that you tend to find. So you tend to find that when people get things fixed, they either, like I have a friend from the UK, they moved out to Nigeria. They bought all IKEA furniture and took like 2 years to really find a good carpenter to build everything. It's not to say that they don't exist, by the way. I'm just saying that with things like Airbnbs, when there are issues with it, it's a little bit harder to get them sorted quickly. Don't get me wrong. Dirty December time, you'll find very high-end Airbnbs that are really good. But I think stay in hotels also because of the safety aspect. You see, the safety aspect, once you go into a hotel, most hotels, especially in West Africa, are in sort of kind of gated area and they're heavily guarded. It's not to say that you'll be robbed, by the way, but I'm just saying for the extra security, you have that. And there's a thing with, if you even have a guest come up to your room, they tend to call you and say, "Oh, this person's saying they're coming up to your room." That doesn't really happen in the West as much, but these are things where that extra security plus the luxury of not having to cook for yourself or find food every day, but there is a hotel, somebody's going to clean your room. I just suggest it's better. Okay. My sister, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that, my sister. God bless. Have I missed someone? Okay, travel insurance is a must. Right. So healthcare system is poor. I need better healthcare. Any recommendations? Good point. So one of the challenges for not only African Americans, Africans in the diaspora, but people returning Africans. So my in-laws, for instance, here in the UK, do not move back to Africa for the healthcare because there's no system of healthcare. Rwanda is the only place that sort of cracked this 90 something percent access to free healthcare, or at least subsidized healthcare. Most places, it's if you're sick, you die, or you have to drag yourself to the hospital. Hospitals in some cases are not up to scratch. You have private hospitals, which are very expensive. Some places you have ambulance systems and so on. In Ghana, there are a few different organizations that have created this. So, yes, you need travel insurance. I think somebody brought that up. You absolutely need travel insurance. But more importantly, it's important to know people on the ground. And this is part of the reason why I say know people on the ground. Reach out to your network, because if something is wrong, something goes wrong, you need to reach out to somebody to say, where do I go? Because there's no 999, sorry, what do you call it? 911 service. So you just pick up the phone and call 911. We have ambulance services in various countries in West Africa. But there's no straightforward 999 service, 911 service that you can find. Of course, not everywhere. There's some other places where you can find it. Okay, Carl. Would any of your advice change for solo traveling, looking to explore the history? My brother, Carl. Solo travelers, especially solo travelers. Thank you. Especially solo travelers. You have to really, 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 really try and do West Africa as a solo traveler. I absolutely recommend it. Now, what you will do, I don't know where you're thinking of going, but my own personal recommendation, I always say West Africa, if you can do West Africa, do it. Because the proximity to go from, oh, Tito, thank you for the cash app. I appreciate that, my brother. Thank you very much. The proximity, West Africa in itself is quite congested. So even just going that trip of going from Nigeria to Benin to Togo to Ghana, where essentially you're going to 4 sovereign nations. One speaks English, the next one speaks French, the next one speaks French, the next one speaks English, right? But all in terms of languages, going through and seeing how the taxis look, the way the people relate to you, the snacks that you could buy on the road. It's as a solo traveler. And if you go online on YouTube in particular, you will find a lot of Europeans who do this solo backpacking. You can backpack through Benin, old Dahomey. Backpack through Benin. Watch my documentary, The Dahomey Kingdom. You can go down to Lake Nukwe, which is right on the coast, where you could see the Ganvier. Ganvier is this town that is on water. Go and experience that. Then go up to Ouida. Then go up to Abome. Then go north where you have the mountains. Then cross over into Togo. Do the same thing. Go to Lomé. Go to Atakpame, which is a mountainous region where people go camping. In fact, when we're in school in Togo, that's where we'd go camping, in the center of the country. Go to Atakpame. You go to a place called Wahala, which is where the World War II, the first gunshots of World War I were fired anywhere in the world, by the way. World War I started in Togo, by the way. The first shots that were fired. So there's so much to see just in those 2 small countries. And of course, Ghana. Nigeria, there's a ton to see. Problem is, it's not safe. So if you're going to do any of that solo traveling, if you do it in Nigeria, make sure you have somebody that's, I wouldn't even, look, let me not recommend Nigeria too much for anybody, but Togo, Ghana, Togo and Benin in particular, much more stable countries where you could travel. In Egypt, you can absolutely go as a solo traveler. If you watch my documentary, it's about to come out. It's a 4-part series. We travel by air, by water, and by train. So you could do all of it in Egypt. Morocco, you could rent a car and drive around Morocco. Go from Casablanca to Agadir to Fez to Marrakesh. You know, those places you can do that sort of thing. You know, okay. Hope that answers your question. Okay, so Global says you want Demba's information. I will put that. How do I do that now? Okay, I will put that. I will copy that to the bottom of the description at the end of the video. All right, it was a toss-up. Source of answers. It was a toss-up between Cairo, Egypt, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Look, depends what you want to see. Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, is vibes on vibes on vibes. Okay, people. It tends to be the sort of place that people go to. As a lot of people start with Tanzania too, because again, it's you have this mixture of Persian, African culture, and then you have access to the beach. And it's also very catered to tourists. So my guess is you've traveled in Africa before, so for you could do that. But again, I'm recommending for people who are going to Africa for the first time. Joshua M, my dream is to move to Tanzania, such a beautiful country. Yep. Tito, thank you, my brother. I appreciate the informative and comprehensive presentation. Thank you very much. So, Francis, I'd really love you to. I'd really love to you every country that I have ancestry from. Okay, so you're connected to Nigeria, Ghana, Congo, Sierra Leone, Gambia, Kenya. Wow. Whoa. I thought mine was a lot. Okay, well, okay. Ghana, you could do. Congo, is it DRC or Congo Brazzaville? Because I lived in Congo Brazzaville as a kid. Just clarify. Sierra Leone, Gambia. You can absolutely do many flights. They do lots of flights to Gambia now. Gambia is becoming a tourist place. So is Senegal, actually. Kenya, of course, you could do. South Africa, you could do. There are all these places that you're connected to. You can actually go to. By the way, people, please let me know. Let me know. Discourage anybody. I know I've said some things about Nigeria and some places, but the reality is you can go anywhere. There's nothing stopping you from going anywhere. It's just about the planning. Who do you know on the ground or who can you connect with? I can absolutely connect you with anybody in every single one of those places, bar. I already know people in South. I know people from South Africa I can connect you with, and I'm sure you know them too. But in every single one of those places, if you just how do we do this now? Just leave you guys have my email, right? Actually, hit me on Instagram. So my Instagram is on the my own personal Instagram. My God, do I have a personal Instagram? Yeah, I do. Honora Abua. Just hit me on that and I will connect you with everybody. I have no problem. We have to make this the year of our return. All right. Village. Uh Great information. Thank you very much. Selamwit Daya. TZ is beautiful and green. Thank you very much. If that is everything, my people, I'm gonna bid you a good night. It's been great doing this with you. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to do over the next couple of days. I'm gonna try and be more current with these lives again. So many deadlines, but yeah. Okay, couple things also. I always forget to do this. Please make sure. Do you have contacts in Dar? Yes, absolutely. So yeah. So here's my. What did I just do? Hang on a minute. So here is my. Hang on. That's not what I want. Let's take that off. Okay. So if you would like to, I'm just going to put my IG. For those of you who don't follow me, I've put it in the chat. Hit me up on that. I will directly connect you to the people if I can, or I'll just give them. If not, if you want to email me here. Okay. Okay. Carl, thank you very much. You're very welcome, my brother. Listen, everybody, anything else you need, let me know. Also, I would like to do a live with some of you guys too. I'd like to meet some of you. Some of you have been on this thing for a very long time, so I'd love to do one with you. But we'll figure it out. Always please make sure you keep liking the videos. Please make sure you like this video, guys, before you get out of here. Please make sure you like it. Got to keep the algorithm going. But other than that, thank you very much. Have a good evening, and I will speak to you all very, very soon. Yes, choose a country and go. No excuses. Let 2023 be your year of return.